Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Hi,
Today,
Carolyn.
we are so excited because we're talking with Jason Krohn. He's a co-founder of Claims Crafters, and they created an innovative AI-driven tool to help restoration companies and insurance companies determine the total loss of a claim. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jason? And I'm really
Ye-
happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Caroline, for the invite. Excited to talk with you today about some of the advancements specifically that we've done in the property and casualty world. Specifically, contents valuations is what we focus on. But again, I'm Jason Krohn. I'm the co-founder of Claims Crafters. Um, a little background on me. I've been in the enterprise software space for close to 30 years, um, with some of the largest enterprise companies that are out there. And in 2019, one of the organizations I was working with started to pursue embedding AI into their software. And I really started to become interested in what is all this stuff? What is AI? How does it impact the productivity of the software space? And so I started to pursue some graduate programs specifically at MIT in what's called neural linguistics processing at MIT's computer science and artificial intelligence laboratory. And I've been doing quite a bit with AI as a hobby, and actually had an opportunity to work with somebody on a contents valuation pursuit. And basically, what was happening, the person that I know was working for a restoration company, and they were doing contents for a total loss. They were a little bit behind the eight ball because the carrier was on them. They wanted to get the results out of this contents process. And this individual had approached me about possibly doing pricing for contents using AI. He had known that I was experimenting with AI. And so I tinkered around with some algorithms, and by the end of the day, we were able to get that particular list of items priced not only for replacement value, but also actual cash value uh, by the end of the day. So, in speaking with my friend or this individual, he had said, I think you're onto something because wow, if you could turn this list around at the end of the day, it might have implications for the industry, and that brought us to where we're at today with Claims Crafters.
Oh, that's so awesome, so practical. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about Claims Crafters and what its mission is?
Yeah, certainly. So Claims Crafters, we have produced a product called Contents IQ, which is an AI first platform designed specifically to handle contents valuations for total losses. So when we think about total losses, this is kind of interesting. Um, and I grabbed this from the Insurance Information Institute. On average, you have 4.5 to 6.5 claims filed, property and casualty, of which 10 to 15% of those claims are total losses. So when you think about the contents implication, so of that, 6.5 million claims, and we use, let's say, oh, I don't know, 10%, maybe there's around 700,000 claims that require contents evaluations. And on average, there's about, the cost to do these valuations are about $3,000 from the restoration organization. But the interesting thing is that brings the total addressable market, the TAM, to close to $1.7 billion. So this isn't trivial. And so to accommodate that market, we produced this contents IQ, and it's all about using AI for speed, accuracy, and transparency in the valuation of those items, with the homeowner, on behalf of the homeowner, with the likes of carriers, adjusters, and restoration companies. So again,
Great.
Speed, accuracy, and transparency.
Sounds good. That is definitely what AI provides us with. So can you go into a little bit more detail about the product that you guys created?
Certainly. So if we think about the inventorying of contents, for a total loss,
Mhm.
and let's say on average you have 3,000 line items, and those 3,000 line items could be anything from appliances to electronics, to clothes, to furniture, right? There's a lot of stuff. And so for 3,000 line items, typically it might take 2 to 3 weeks for an organization, whether it's a restoration company, or a content specific company, to go in and inventory every single item, just to only go back to the office and now have to look up each individual item using a tool like Google, and trying to derive what the replacement value is for those items, but also trying to understand the actual cash value. And what we find is if you look at 3,000 line items, and on average, it takes about 3 minutes to look up the item, go to Google, look up the price, record the price, and then go back to the next line item. You're talking about 9,000 minutes to do 3,000 line items. 9,000 minutes equates to about 150 hours.
Yeah.
And then when you start to think about an 8-hour shift, you're talking 19 work days of getting that information assembled and getting it back to the policy owner, the homeowner, to validate, what they should be expecting for value. Well, I don't know. I think 19 days is unacceptable. When people have lost everything, they want to get back into their house and get 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 compensated for the items that they've lost, decently. And so our value proposition is we could take those 3,000 line items, use AI, and get the replacement cash value, but also get the actual cash value, which means we have to get the depreciation in under 3 minutes. So we're all about compressing that time that it takes, to do the lookup on a tool like Google, and allow AI to do it, and at the same time providing speed, accuracy, and transparency in that process.
Right, that's phenomenal. I mean, my experience in my career as an adjuster, I remember the days that I spent logging things, and it would be a phenomenal time saver for sure. Um, can you
Yeah,
tell
just one.
us?
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sure.
Just on the time saver, the one thing that I do want to interject,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
when individuals are going in and they're looking up prices and they're using Google, Google's a great tool, but the question is that really the price?
Mhm.
And we know that when you're doing searches through things like Google Shopping, the first items that pop up are typically those vendors that are advertising the most. So there is a bias in the pricing lookup because you're single sourcing, you're single threading it. Where our product Contents IQ comes into play is that we look up every single item 10 times, 10 times. And what that allows us to do is get a nice smoothing
Mhm.
statistically of all those items. Now, of course, you'll have those outliers that are really high or really low, but let's get that out, and then look at those prices that are closest, and then try to derive, maybe the median of that pricing sampling, so that we could be much more accurate in the valuation.
I love it. That's great. Can you give us an example or tell us a story about a client you've worked for and the value that it has provided to their organization?
Yeah, so there's a number. So today we're working with the third largest restoration company in the United States. Okay. And they had a contents business, and it was fledgling. But what they were finding was often they would give up that business to third parties to go out and actually do the inventory, do the pricing, or they were just losing business, quite frankly, because they just weren't on the radar as being, an organization to go to for, carriers or adjusters when it came to contents valuations or the contents business. So I've been working with this organization, geez, for close to a year and a half, 2 years. And two things we've found. One was their business has expanded dramatically. In the contents business is dramatically expanded because now they have a tool that makes them much more efficient when they're going off and doing this contents business. And then not only are they seeing an increase of business that they weren't capturing before, the margin in that business is pretty healthy as well. So they're getting, it's new business for them, business that either they were losing or never grabbing in the first place. But couple that with healthy margin and growing, that's really a recipe for success, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I I was wondering what are the major shifts that you are seeing in your industry right now, Jason?
I think there's a demand for accuracy, right? So if we think about in the current state right now, when you're doing contents, there's typically two things that are being produced in contents valuations. There's the replacement or the replacement cash value and the actual cash value, replacement cost value, I'm sorry, and actual cash value. Both of those have to be on point. Okay. So in the RCV space, those numbers are fairly solid because people are looking these things up. The actual cash value is suspect. And what's happening, and I'm seeing two approaches to this. One is, when it comes to depreciation, there isn't any depreciation because they don't know how to depreciate these items. So if you don't have depreciation, you can't calculate ACV. Or the other thing that's happening is somebody's sticking a thumb in the air and they're coming up with an approximation of what they believe to be the depreciation for items. And so, for example, I've seen a depreciation of 50% across the board. Well, I think we can all agree that the way that the appliances depreciate are very different than the way furniture depreciates,
Yeah.
very different than the way that the actual furniture depreciates.
Yeah.
So now with AI, we're able to remedy that and actually get the actual depreciation for those things so that we can derive the ACV and
Mhm.
allow that to be much more accurate. So that's a long way of saying I think there's a demand for accuracy with automation. There's a demand for speed. And then, of course, you want to know what the basis is for the pricing. So there has to be transparency. And I
Right.
think as consumers, we're demanding this in the way that we go to market and we buy things in the way that we interact. So
Right.
again, speed, accuracy, and transparency is this recurring theme here.
Right. And it impacts the way you leverage it. That's great. Claims Crafters is leveraging it 100%.
Certainly.
Um, how has this trend impacted your growth strategy? Does it affect that at all?
Oh, most definitely.
Mhm.
So because we are we're a niche player. We focus on contents,
Mhm.
whereas in the market there really isn't an AI player to do contents valuations for total losses. So that
Mhm.
alone has driven us in an explosive way. And we're starting to get noticed. And this is really interesting, Caroline. We're we're getting noticed by other organizations outside the property and casualty space. So originally, we were working with restoration companies, and then that blended into the adjuster, marketplace. Carriers are now taking a look at us, but what's really interesting is we're having law firms now knocking on our door for things like subrogation or probate planning or estate planning, because in the probate world, there needs to be a value for items in somebody's household when they move on. And
Yeah,
we've starting to see a lot more action in areas that, quite frankly, Caroline, I wouldn't have even dreamed of actually happening. And here's where we're at. So that is that's adding to our growth. Um, and of course, AI being on top of everybody's minds is contributing to the visibility that we're having, in the marketplace too, right? So if you went online and you did a Google search of, contents valuation and AI, will be number one or two, on that Google search or whatever search provider that you're looking at. So
brilliant, brilliant. I mean, you're starting to go outside of the box and exploring where the needs are. That's great
for
for
certain.
your growth, definitely. Where do you see Claims Crafters then in 6 months from now to a year from now?
Yeah, that's a great question. The market is changing so fast, and I go if we look back at where AI was, 3 years ago, on November 30th of what was it, 2022, ChatGPT hit was available for public consumption. And think about the implications that has had in how we conduct our life. I was just reading an article, Microsoft has a huge investment with OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, for their Copilot product. And and now they're recording tens of millions of users using Copilot in 2 years. It's astounding. So, the implication for claims crafters is, we're constantly keeping up on these models and making sure that we're compliant to the contemporary models that these AI providers are producing. But there's another shift that's happening in the AI space. And what that is agentic AI. So if you think about Chat GPT, it's a
Mhm.
great chatbot, right? You can ask it a question and it'll return a result. That's the generative nature, the G in GPT. But where agentic comes into play is, think about a workflow that happens in your business, electronically, and you're giving AI the ability to understand what that input is and to automatically run that workflow through the workflow engine within your enterprise. And so this has implications for fraud detection in the insurance marketplace, perhaps the personalization of policies, for homeowners.
Mhm.
But it also has implications for claims crafters. So, now we're starting to kind of look at agentic capabilities, when it comes to how homeowners are compensated, for those items. So the next shoe to drop for us is, we provide the pricing, but now giving the homeowner the ability to gain compensation from their carrier and get compensation for that recoverable depreciation, and not have to go through the whole, submission of physical receipts. You can do it through a mobile device and using agentic capabilities, working with your carrier to make sure that you're compensated properly and in time, and using transparent and in full transparency as well. So to summarize that, it's a lot of stuff, but we're looking at keeping up at models, employing agentic AI capabilities in our own workflow so that we can produce, a mobile technology where homeowners can be properly compensated for the items that they've lost using the pricing that was derived in Contents IQ of Claims Crafters.
So amazing. I can't wait to see where Claims Crafters ends up in 6 months to a year from now. In closing, Jason, do you have anything else that you would like to add for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean we put out a lot of stuff, and again, AI can be kind of a scary thing, if you don't completely understand it or if it's new and you're constantly being bombarded by all this information. But we're happy to work with you. So, if we can be found at www.claimscrafters, one word.com. And if you have any questions or if we can be of assistance, we're happy to chat and we're here to help you.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank you again. It's been an honor having you on the show and a pleasure also. Um, so actually, I just want to mention that the company that Jason has been talking about is going to do a part 2 to this series, and they're going to talk on how they're putting Jason's product in practice. So looking forward to seeing you all. Tune in for that. Have a nice day.